the split worked?
No, not really, but I figured out a way to get everything.
Okay, all right, that's pretty good. All right, thanks everybody. We'll just start with questions. You can kind of just ask questions to whomever, both, or however you guys want to work it, but kind of keep it 20-ish minutes and then get rolling. So Jeff, if you want to start.
Yeah, I guess, Tyler, I'll start with you. When you look at the transfer class that has played this year, it looks like there were many more hits than misses. When you start putting together next year's class, will you basically use the same process again, or with just some tweaks, or do you envision doing things much differently?
Yeah, I mean, consistency is key. Those guys are very productive. You're gonna tweak it year to year because the seasons are different, and certainly the environment is different. But we found some success in our process, and look forward to tweaking it and building it over this class.
This is for both of you because every year seems like the portal changes just a little bit. This year, you're not able to have them visit you in December, and technically the portal opens in January. With relationships such a big deal when you look at, because you're trying to feel like the gel of the team, how do you do that when things move quicker in January, when you can't sometimes bring them in as much as you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, just with the calendar change, it really puts a lot of onus just on our recruiting staff and our coaching staff as a whole to make sure that we're, in a good place from an evaluation standpoint, just advanced scouting standpoint. I think we're consistent, or I think that's consistent across the board in college football nowadays. If you're going to stay ahead of the curve, you got to have good infrastructure from a personnel staff standpoint to constantly be evaluating college tape. So, thanks to the investment from Carla and from Tyler, we feel like we're in a really good spot there. And yeah, just, it's a little bit unclear, certainly, because this time last year we already had, a bunch of guys signed with us. So some uncertainty about what that's going to look like. But for us, it's always going to start with retention. Yep. It's always going to start with just retaining the guys that are key to our success, both this year and moving forward, and then seeing what that picture looks like, after that process unfolds.
I would say the same. It's starting with the retention piece. That's critical because the transfers want to know who they're playing with, right? So understanding the current roster and its needs helps us, identify what type of players we want out of the portal. The worst thing you want to do is spend time in the portal trying to retain players and acquire players. That's the worst case scenario, given there's only one portal window. So right now our focus is on retaining the current student athletes on the roster and getting a sense on who would like to move on to the NFL, who's looking to stay. Then that analysis informs how we attack the portal in January.
Justin, you mentioned the calendar. What in your guys' minds, as you batted around in the office, is an ideal fix for where the sport is right now from a calendar basis? I saw the Ohio State AD recently suggest do away with spring ball. That eliminates the need to bring people in January, then just go to summer OTAs and such. What in your guys' minds, given your experiences, is the best way?
I mean, it's changed so rapidly. I think the first element, regardless of how we pivot, is the competition calendar, right? So that has been elongated with the tournament there. So that's really leading to how we react from a roster management perspective. So for us, we're kind of seeing how the competition calendar evolves. And then that does inform what our recommendation would be around the talent acquisition. And most of it is really the challenge is the academic piece. I mean, that's the challenge is the academic piece. And there's so many different institutions with different calendars. So you have some that are on a quarter system for a semester, and then there's a graduation piece in the winter. So the competition calendar, I think, is probably most critical first and foremost. And then the academic calendars of these institutions, and then that will inform how we manage that from a football perspective. So a ton of different unknowns there, but I think the competition piece is critical to understand what that would look like if the playoffs were to expand.
Yeah, I mean, David, great question, right? And we've analyzed it 1,000 different times, and I think any way you slice it, there's gonna be pros and cons to having one portal window, to having a winter portal window and a spring window, or if you have one in the spring, I mean, any way you slice it, there's going to be positives and negatives to it. So, man, I just do what they tell me to do from a calendar standpoint, right? It's certainly not my job to come up with that for the whole NCAA. There's a lot of smart people in higher places than I am that can make that decision. So, our mantra is kind of, hey, fight them until hell freezes over, and if hell freezes over, fight them on the ice.
Right.
So whatever rules they give us, we're going to play by them.
Yeah, you guys mentioned retention. How do you guys determine what a player's worth is to you guys versus maybe what his worth is in the market for both transfer portal possibility and the NFL? Like, I'm thinking your older guys who have been in your program. Is a player like that worth more to you guys than what he might be on the open market?
I guess I'll take that one. It's not really our responsibility to determine what a player's value is on the open market, right? So for us, is the retention piece is critical because there's value in culture and continuity. That may not be an element that you consider when you're acquiring a student athlete. So, we build the program inside out, and that starts with the retention players that we've pursued in high school, right? Got them into the program, familiar with Coach Elliott and the staff, is attacking that first and foremost. And then the other piece is their desire to stay, right? There's a phenomenal opportunity for our student athletes, and we encourage that. We get it. It's a part of it. And having some real and honest conversations early so that they can make the best informed decision for themselves, and we're really transparent during that process. But it's hard for us to tell what their market is on the open market, what their value is in the open market, because everyone's budgets are different, right? It's not everyone has the same revenue share pot, NIL pot, so their value could change in the market.
Yeah, I'd echo that same sentiment. Just with the key difference team to team, conference to conference, just pools of funds look different, so things aren't going to be consistent. So I think just having our own internal framework about how we value certain positions and certain pieces is critical, and I think Tyler's done an outstanding job with that.
I'm guessing that most of the players will want to go home and be with their families after the bowl game. So on the retention front, have you already had these conversations with players who have eligibility left?
Yes, we have. So we've started that process, and that's been something that kind of both sides have sought each other out. So been making some good solid progress with many of the guys that we anticipate returning next year. So a lot of that information should be firmed up here once we finish up the bowl game and kind of turn over to the new year. But really good progress on that front. You
added a number of guys in the spring last year or after the school year, several of whom have had a big impact. What does the elimination of the spring portal mean for Virginia specifically?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it just condenses all your decision making, for the entire year into just a couple weeks. Just what we talk about is, throughout the off season, you kind of build a house, right? I know Coach Elliott uses the analogy during camp. We build a house for the season, and then we got to live in whatever house we build. But like for us, from a personnel standpoint, you really build a house and hope it can withstand the storm that's coming in the fall. And like before we kicked the ball off against Coastal, that's what we said. Just like, hey, hopefully we built a good enough house. And you got to build your house in 2 weeks, right? In the winter. And so, like last year and years past, you could kind of get through the winter window and say, hey, I think we could use an upgrade here. Or, I think we need to tweak something over here, and you could use some, or use that portal window in the spring to really firm things up before you go into camp. So all of that is just truncated into a 2-week period in January. And so we've had countless discussions about the differences and the things that we need to maybe just accelerate to make sure that we build the best house. But I think the key difference is just all those decisions are happening more frequently on a quicker time frame, which just I told Tyler I'm not going to leave the house without my AirPods in, just so I can take calls 24/7 over the next couple of weeks.
I would add to that. I think with one window, it will stress your process. Mm-hmm. Right, it will stress your process, and it does it could attribute to more mistakes because it's an expedited time process, right? So to evaluate, to build rapport, to assess fit, you don't have a ton of margin of error that you had before because you can make a mistake, right? It might maybe not a right fit, and then guys will go in the portal again, and then you can reevaluate. You don't have that luxury. So we're going to lean on our process, be very measured as we're evaluating prospects, assessing the fit, and for us, it's been production over potential. You've heard that several across the country, and it's pretty evident. A lot of the teams that are successful are older. Right, they're older, they're more mature, and you got guys on your roster that are more productive. But it will stress our process and our system, and we have to be disciplined, right? Disciplined in that process because you really only have one bite at the apple.
In addition to the trimming of the portal windows from 2 to 1, another seismic change from a year ago is the College Sports Commission. What impact, if at all, has NIL Go and such had on the market for deals, or is it still essentially unregulated in your guys' eyes?
I would say it's still too early to tell with that. I think once we get through this season and then maybe basketball or some other sports, you'll have a clearer picture on it. It hasn't been a massive impediment for us thus far. But there's been some uncertainty around that process, and we get it. It's new. We're all trying to adapt to it, but I wouldn't say it's been an impediment for us in building and retaining our roster at this point.
I like David said earlier, you guys had success from last year, the portal, and trying to get the right fit together. Now with an expedited portal, what lessons from the last portal are you able to take, and how can you kind of adjust your approach a bit?
I mean, I think we have multiple years of lessons, and I think, just like Tyler said earlier, I think just valuing production over potential, right, and valuing fit over some sort of splash is always going to bode well for just success here at UVA and for Coach Elliott's kind of just program here. So I think the biggest lesson for us is that this is a different place for a lot of great reasons, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be seeking us out, and just having the same sort of formula last year, just with the type of young men that we're trying to bring in here, is going to be critical. So I think, coming in, we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 4 years, and production over potential, fit over splash, those are really the key lessons that I think we can take away, not just from last year, but from 22, 23, and beyond.
Couldn't agree more. I think Justin said it well. I think the other piece is relationships. With agents and agencies and other folks has been really, really helpful for us. Mm-hmm. And for me and for Justin is that when you're able to meet and develop rapport with agents and align with who they are, they typically attract a certain type of client/student athlete, mm-hmm. right? So building that rapport with the agents so they know who we are and what we're about as a program. I mean, they come to us and try to recommend, clients that fit Virginia because they've spent countless hours on the phone with myself and Justin about what we're looking for. So that's one lesson learned, I would say, from the previous portal windows were the agents and the agencies and the ones that understand who we are as an institution and who we are as a football program has been helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that piece especially has been critical, which was newer last year. Yep. And for us, like I said, we're different for a lot of good reasons. And I think that as folks have gotten to know what we're about, what Coach Elliott's about, this last cycle, they were able to see this place in person, mm-hmm. live in color, and they're like, that place is different, and we know what's going to work there and what's not going to work there. So, I think that's going to be critical for us going forward.
Justin, you guys added a lot on the O-line, the D-line, and in the secondary last year to bolster the depth at those spots. Is that still going to be the philosophy this portal cycle of those positions you guys are always going to be seeking depth at?
Absolutely. Tyler and I, just working with Coach last year, I mean, we wanted to build this thing from the inside out, right? That's really, when you look at, the teams that have success, that are playing deep into the year, playoff teams, championship caliber teams, and then teams that have had success at Virginia. They've all been built from the inside out, specifically up front on offense and defense. So that'll certainly be the priority, both from a retention standpoint and from an acquisition standpoint. It all starts up front, and then adding skill around it is also going to be key. Not that necessarily takes a back seat to the trenches, but we want to be known as a team that's built, both up front on offense and defense, and plays a physical style of football.
Will there be players that you add in the January portal who do not get here until the summer that have to or is everyone who signs next month coming for the spring semester?
Yeah, I think there's going to be multiple guys that are in that conversation. Obviously, portal's not open, so it's tough to really determine here on December 22nd. But my expectation are that there's going to be guys like Tyler Neville, that are we love them. We love them in January. We visit them in January. However, they just because of their academic timeline, they don't graduate until the summer, and we can't add them until summer. So certainly we have. There's an advantage to coming mid-year, to coming in January, and being here throughout winter workouts with Coach Smo, going through spring. But I just think I think the population is going to be so large that's in the portal that I think there's going to be multiple folks just who because they can't graduate until May, that they can't join us till summer conditioning.
Can you describe the process a little bit, considering that a lot of guys declared that they were going to enter the portal as much as maybe almost a month ago, and just talk about how much advance work you guys or your staff is doing in weeding out the hundreds of guys and what you might be looking for, and just how that entire process works to where you can find the targets you want to go after.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take it. So I think, like I said, nowadays in 2025, your personnel departments need to have the right infrastructure, right? Both from a high school scouting standpoint and from a college scouting standpoint. So that process didn't start for us when we saw the first Twitter notification that somebody was announcing their intent. That started for us in the summertime. Just okay, who and you're not doing anything that's out of bounds. You're just evaluating rosters. I mean, that's what teams do in the pros. So, we have a ton of evals just from our opponents that we played from different teams across different leagues. So you already have a good base of evaluation. So you're not playing catch up so rapidly, especially when there's only one window. And then of course just any personnel director or any personnel department worth their salt is obviously going to be jumping on these evals as soon as they see intentions to enter. So safe to assume that anytime you see an announcement that our personnel office is going to be on it, right? And not doing anything out of bounds, just evaluating tape. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think that's you have to in this environment. Is proper preparation so that you can be very intentional once the portal opens and you're not several days and weeks behind.
You mentioned doing due diligence with scouting and such. I'm sure other programs have scouted you guys, and you just won 10 games in a regular season, which I imagine has created more interest in your personnel and your front office. Have you found that your players and some of your staff are in demand from other schools?
Yes. Short answer is yes, and that's a part of it, right? That's a part of it. So yes, that we're anticipating that. It is hand-to-hand combat and retaining your players and acquiring players. It's the new era of college athletics, certainly around football. But short answer is yes, of course.
Yes, agreed. There's been significant interest, and I think that just makes it all more important, right? What Coach Elliott constantly preaches about, and building the model program here. And I think building the model program not only attracts great talent, players and staff to want to be a part of this, but to want to stay. So that's always going to be top of mind for us.
Yeah. I think Greg had a good point about the open market is that, several of our players that have decided to stay, for several seasons likely took a pay cut, to be candid. They probably could have went somewhere else to earn more, and they decided to stay because of the culture and the way that we treat our student athletes here, right? And that's a credit to Coach Elliott and the program that he's built, that guys want to stay here. They value the education, they value the coaching and the development, and they've likely taken, a pay cut. It could have went somewhere else to earn more, but value the experience here at Virginia, which is a testament to the health of the program.
And then one of the most striking components about your success in the portal last season was you guys hit on players from programs as disparate as Ohio State, Tennessee Tech, North Carolina Central. How do you go about evaluating someone who hasn't played at a Power 4 level, a G5 or even a FCS Division II?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at, guys from those G5 schools, FCS schools, in some cases Division II and III schools, I think when you're going down a level, if you're going to project positive performance at the P4 level, man, you got to see a bunch of traits first of all, and then you got to see production. Specifically as you keep kind of going down the food chain. So, for a guy like Jamari Taylor, it didn't take Bill Polian to realize that he was a good player, at the FCS level. Now, were there certain traits that we valued more that we thought could fit with our offense? Sure. And then you got to know him. He's just a tremendous young man that has no diva, and he's hard work and all that kind of stuff. But just from a pure tape standpoint, I think when you're looking at those lower divisions, there has to be they have to be clearly, making a difference at that level. And a guy like Daniel Rickard, same deal. Just at that OVC level, he was a huge difference maker for that defense. And then anytime that those schools have an opportunity to play FBS comp, or a G5 team plays a P4 team, FCS team plays an FBS team. Like Daniel Rickard, Tennessee Tech played Georgia last year. That was the first game that we watched, right? And he was actually playing with a club on his hand, and he's out there battling against, some of the best tackles in college football, and he's playing well. And so, you pair that with, the stack of tape against the relative comp at FCS, and, we felt like it was a good fit.
I would add to that too. I think once we were able to eval the talent and the traits, it's getting them on ground and understanding their mental makeup, right? Can they go through the rigor of being a Power 4 student athlete? That's the academic rigor, that's the athletic rigor. So then once we see the tape and evaluate that and lay our eyes on that individual, have a conversation, that's where the fit piece really comes into play outside of the football traits.
And just the whole picture, I think understanding the whole picture for each one of these kids is so important. Like Mitchell Melton, what's the whole picture with Mitchell Melton? It's you might look at it, okay, he was a rotational player at Ohio State. Well, Ohio State had a lot of depth, they had a lot of talent at that position, but he also, had the unfortunate deal of having back-to-back ACL injuries in 2021, 2002, or in 2022 on the opposite knees in spring practice. So he kind of was set back. They had a ton of talent, but in spurts, when you watch him when he's healthy, in spurts at Ohio State, man, he was disruptive and he was highly effective. So just having an opportunity to project that is kind of what we do. And then just like Tyler said, if you check those boxes, then when you bring them on grounds and you feel good about the mental makeup, then slam dunk. Let's go. That's kind of how we roll.
For either of you, you've mentioned the retention piece numerous times. Some players have waivers that have to get decided, and we know the NCAA is not always expedient with that process. How does that affect your end of the job when you're trying to prepare for this position may or may not have this player?
It's critical, and that's where you have plan A, B, C, D. You have to go down that path. If that player is able to return, what does that mean for that particular position room? What does it mean for that side of the ball? So we're gamming out several different scenarios and mapping that out in the event that student athlete gains the waiver or not.
Yeah, and I think you kind of become conditioned to operate like that at every position anyways, because waiver or not, whether a kid has eligibility remaining or doesn't, everybody is essentially on,
1 year
deals. So I think you're always kind of conditioned to have plan A, B, C, and D, just like Tyler said.
Have you guys heard anything on Chandler's waiver yet from the NCAA?
We're hopeful. And again, going back to your question, Chris, you got to plan for all different scenarios. Our desire and hope that he returns and able to play, but you got to map several different scenarios out.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. If not, how does that change your quarterback recruiting, if at all, if he doesn't get the waiver?
We haven't really talked a ton about that right now because we're hopeful that he returns. But when the time is right, we'll sit down with the staff and coach and the coordinators and talk through that. But our hope and desire that he's back and we're able to build around him for 2026.
In pro sports, a lot of times a deal is not official until the players involved pass physicals with their new teams. How much access to medical information do you guys have on players in the portal? I know there were a couple this year who kind of arrived banged up and never really got healthy. Were you kind of privy to all their medical information on the front end?
Yeah, so a great question, and not to get on a soapbox, but that's just one of the issues that we have in college athletics is there's kind of an information void when it comes to medical records, and it's not just an issue specific to UVA. It's every team is dealing with it. So, for us, we've incorporated just a medical examination element, right, which is consistent across the board. And I think when you talk to most schools, and then, it's essentially the information that you're gathering is, what are they able to kind of share that they're willing to share, and then how much, information has been granted that their trainer is willing to share with our trainer. So. Our staff just works tirelessly behind the scenes to gather as much information as humanly possible, but it's not like the NFL where they have to, if they're going to go to the combine, they have to release all these documents. It's not quite as sophisticated as that, but for us, we're trying to gather that information as much as we possibly can from training staffs. Trying to press the young man, quite frankly, to see how forthcoming he'll be with information. And I think that tells you a lot about just the character of a young man as well. So all of that factors into the decision.
I would add, too, it goes back to the relational piece with that particular student-athlete's representation, right? So you're having conversation with the agent and you're asking those questions, and it's a reputational consideration. If that agent isn't forthcoming about that prospect's injury history, a school will sign that player, and then the player had an injury. Now that relationship with that agent may be impacted, right? So it goes back to treating people with respect, transparency, building rapport, so that you can mitigate some of those factors that may come up around,
Sure.
Injury history.
And then just again, just the whole picture is important. So, you look at, somebody like Brady Wilson, right? I mean, he was banged up, right, throughout his career at UAB, but he didn't miss games, right? He was playing through it. So you could kind of gauge pain tolerance, mental toughness, just things like that. So, you can never gather much, too much information on these guys.
Let's do one more. We have student athletes here in minutes. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just the math behind what you guys have to do too, because there is the new 105 rule, but you have designated student athletes that can allow to kind of go over that. How does that process work? And how much can you go technically over there?
Yeah,
He's a math wizard. He has a board in his office, and we're looking at numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to toss. You can take that one.
Yeah, we got 3 or 4 different spreadsheets that we work off of, and there's sliding scales, and I give it to Coach Elliott, and he's just like, what is this? You know what I mean? I think it makes sense in my brain, but yeah, it's the math piece is real, and I think constantly finding ways to just maximize what our scholarship amount is going to be, along with you mentioned the DSA piece, because we're at 105, right? But with DSAs, with medical exemptions, we can live above that. So what we always talk about is how can we got 125 lockers in that locker room, right? our number's 105. We can live above that with DSAs and with medical exemptions. How do we possibly find ourselves maximizing every single one of those lockers down there? And just you asked how the process works. A lot of different spreadsheets and different things that we track on from semester to semester. Now that we can kind of split up 8 agreements, right? It doesn't have to be the 100% traditional scholarship like it used to be. That gives us more flexibility, just to build the best possible roster, right? And eventually, as the DSA thing cycles out, right, we'll be at a true 105. But right now, I think we're just how do we maximize those lockers in that locker room? And there's a couple of different schools of thought about how we do it, but yeah, I just kind of do that all day, every day.
Yeah, and maximize it with the right young men, right? I mean, that cannot be lost. Is that yes, our jobs are to bring talent, right? It's to infuse it and enhance the talent profile of the program. That's our job. Coach Elliott's job is to build the team. So those are two very different situations, and I empathize with a lot of these coaches. I really, really do. Around the importance of building a team. It's tough in an expedited process. You're infusing all these players into this new environment, and you're trying to build a team to go out and compete to win a championship. Our jobs are not easy, but are simple. It's talent. The coach's job is to build the team, which is hard in a small amount of time. And I feel deep in my heart that our success this year was certainly around our talent was improved, but our team and culture was outstanding. Outstanding of these men coming together in a short amount of time for a common goal. And that's a credit to our coaches and our support staff to bring that group of guys, strangers, together to go out and compete for the University of Virginia. And that's not lost on us. That's a part of our process, is that oftentimes we'll take a less talented player because we believe that they're the right culture fit for Virginia. And that does require discipline after having a very, very successful season where we will be likely pursued by really talented players, right? To maintain that discipline on culture and fit will be a challenge that we're up to for this portal window.
Just to clarify, you said medical exemptions too, so that means there's a different those guys are able to get waivers and not be part of the 105.
So that's determined kind of before we certify the roster for fall competition. So anybody like this past cycle, somebody like Jamarick Morris, right, who suffered a season-ending injury, McKeelan Thomas, Monroe Mills, those individuals are actually they kind of live in a separate deal. So by the time that happens, your ability to acquire an outside guy is limited. Mm-hmm. However, you can bolster it with you can bolster your scout team with different options on campus, on grounds, right? So students. So I mean, it's those are things that you're considering high flight transfers on other rosters, but you also have to consider, okay, if all of a sudden McKeelan Thomas is down for the year, right? That opens up a roster spot, and you have to have an inventory that you're constantly maintaining that you can tap into if and when you just need to have an extra special team scout team guy out there. So, and again, that's where we have to lean on the staff and personnel staff and all the different folks that are here in the Hardy Center to make sure that process is running smoothly. But to answer your question, that doesn't really give us a ton of ability to go and take another transfer that late in the process, since that's determined in August.
Unless there's someone on ground that's 6'5", 275 pounds that you can go and bring in after an injury. It is extremely limited in kind of responding to an injury of a student athlete that's out for the year.
Joe, do you have one? Go ahead.
Yeah, one more. How many people, personnel do you have working on your staff on all of this?
Yeah. So,
you want to take that?
Yeah, I can speak for the personnel. I mean, we got 7 full-time, personnel employees, or recruiting personnel. 7 full-time folks that are here, and we got several part-time guys, and then we have a team of 15 plus students as well that are all recruiting and personnel specific that help us to just run the machine.
And the one question we get from our readers about Chandler's waiver, what basis are you trying to get the waiver on? Since he's played 6 years, or been in football for 6 years, what's the cause?
I don't know if we want to go
Can you
into,
say
Yeah.
that?
yeah, I don't know if we can go into specifics
Yeah.
about it.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't touch on specifics, but it's in regards to his participation in the 2022 season.